In a city of gleaming surfaces, Vicki Mendoza had learned to see beneath them all. It was a skill refined by necessity. The careful calculation behind every security camera angle, the subtle tells in a shoplifter's posture, the invisible patterns of inventory that disappeared between shipment and shelf. At 29, loss prevention wasn't what she'd dreamed of, but it had become her expertise, tracking the things that vanished when no one was looking. Before we start this story, subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more stories like this to life. She moved through the luxury department store like a ghost with a purpose, radio quiet at her hip, eyes mapping everything that didn't belong. 5 years earlier, she'd taken this job with a singular focus that still burned beneath her professional demeanor. Her mother's hands, calloused from 15 years of folding designer clothes and polishing glass cases, only to be accused of stealing a bracelet she'd never touched. The deportation notice came 3 weeks later. The mall had swallowed her mother whole, and Vicki had walked through its gleaming doors every day since, not to protect its treasures, but to expose its lies. Each discrepancy she documented, each fraud she uncovered was a small justice her mother would never see. What had started as vengeance had evolved into something more complex, a private war fought with spreadsheets and surveillance footage. While her former classmates built careers in law offices and tech startups, Vicki had become fluent in the language of luxury retail's shadowed economy. She could trace missing merchandise through a dozen hands, follow money through shell companies, and identify the weak points where greed overrode caution. The boutique managers who dismissed her as mall security never noticed how carefully she was watching them instead of the customers. Tonight, the West Coast's premier luxury mall hummed with the particular energy of exclusivity. Marble floors reflected recessed lighting like still water. The scent of sandalwood and bergamot hung in the air, pumped through vents to create the illusion of sophistication. Security guards stood at practiced intervals, earpieces and dark suits lending them the appearance of federal agents rather than retail sentinels. The store had officially closed 20 minutes ago, but the real business of the mall operated on different hours entirely. Vicki's radio crackled to life with a voice that carried none of the usual boredom. Eyes on the tuxedo, neck ink, he's not shopping. She rounded a pillar of polished stone and saw him immediately, though he clearly wasn't trying to blend in. DeCarlo stood between displays of watches worth more than her yearly salary, his midnight tuxedo cut with the precision of a weapon. The black waves of tattoos climbing his neck seemed to ripple with each slight turn of his head. 3 men in matching dark suits created a loose perimeter around him, their attention everywhere except on the woman who now stood directly in his path. The contrast between them couldn't have been more deliberate. His formal wear against her practical blazer and sensible shoes, his entourage against her solitude. Yet something in the way he tracked her approach suggested he'd been waiting for precisely this interruption. Vicki felt a dangerous recognition spark between them. 2 people who understood how power moved beneath the surface of polite society. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The words came out low and certain, meant for him alone despite the cavernous acoustics of the empty store. "You don't belong here, sir. Take your circus outside." DeCarlo smiled. 2 small steps closed the distance between them until she could smell burning sugar and expensive cologne. His men tensed, but didn't move. "Say that again, and look at me." Vicki did. And in that moment, surrounded by the glittering excess of wealth neither of them was born to, watched by men who expected violence at any moment, everything waited on what she would say next. Vicki stared at the incident report on her screen, cursor blinking at the end of a sentence that read, like all her others, factual, precise, and deliberately stripped of any emotion that might compromise its professional veneer. Subject identified as Eddie DeCarlo was found in South Wing after hours, refused initial request to vacate premises. Security team dispatched. Subject departed without incident at 23:47. Nothing about the way he'd stepped into her space. Nothing about the burning sugar scent of his cologne or how his voice had dropped to a register that seemed designed to bypass her ears and settle directly into her spine. Say that again and look at me. She'd complied, but what happened next wasn't something the incident report system had fields for. She hit submit and closed the window. The mall's security office hummed with the soft electronic pulse of a dozen monitors. Morning light filtered through narrow windows, catching dust motes in shafts of gold that made the utilitarian space almost beautiful for precisely 7 minutes each day. Vicki had timed it once during a particularly tedious shift. "You look like you've been chewing glass," said Marco, dropping into the chair beside her. He slid a paper cup of coffee across the desk. "Figured you might need this after dealing with Tuxedo Man last night." "It was nothing," Vicki replied, taking the coffee. "Just another rich guy who thinks closing hours don't apply to him." Marco raised an eyebrow. That rich guy was DeCarlo. The bosses were having fits when they heard he was here after hours. "Why? He's just another customer." Marco's laugh had an edge to it. "Sure, and sharks are just another fish." Before Vicki could press further, the system alert pinged. Her pattern recognition algorithm had completed its weekly inventory analysis. She'd built it herself, a pet project constructed from community college coding classes and 3 years of meticulously documented inventory anomalies. The mall's official loss prevention software was designed to track shoplifters and employee theft. But Vicki's code tracked something different: the shadows between official shipments and recorded stock. The algorithm had flagged a recurring discrepancy. Every Tuesday, the loading dock received shipments from a distributor labeled Premium Skincare Solutions. But the volume of boxes never matched the inventory increases across the 17 boutiques that carried the brand. Vicki clicked through manifests, tracking numbers, and delivery schedules. The same name kept appearing: Aquila Logistics, listed as the shipping partner. A search through her historical data showed Aquila connected to 8 boutiques with unusually high inventory loss rates, the same boutiques that routinely filed insurance claims for missing merchandise. "You still messing with that program?" Marco asked, peering over her shoulder. "You know Johnson says it's a waste of time." "Johnson thinks anything more complicated than a door alarm is a waste of time," Vicki muttered, saving her findings to an encrypted folder on her personal drive. She spent the afternoon patrolling the mall floors, but her mind remained tangled in the data. The pattern felt deliberate, designed to hide in plain sight, to be dismissed as clerical errors by anyone who wasn't looking closely. It reminded her of something her mother used to say: "The best place to hide is where everyone is already looking, but not seeing." By evening, the memory of DeCarlo had receded, replaced by the puzzle of Aquila Logistics. After her shift, Vicki brought it to her supervisor's office. "Johnson, I've found something I think you should see." He barely glanced up from his phone. "Let me guess. More of your conspiracy theories about boutique managers." "It's not a theory when I have data," she said, sliding a printout across his desk. "These 8 stores all use the same logistics company, all report similar patterns of inventory shrinkage, and all file insurance claims within the same 3-day window each month." Johnson scanned the document with the enthusiasm of someone reading terms of service. "Mendoza, you're good at catching shoplifters. Stick to that. This corporate stuff," he tapped the paper with his index finger. "This is above your pay grade." "So you're not going to investigate?" "I'm going to finish my coffee and approve overtime for the holiday season. Go home, Vicki." The parking garage was nearly empty by the time she left, her sensible sedan one of the few remaining vehicles. As she approached, something on her windshield caught the fluorescent light, a black envelope tucked under the wiper blade. Her name was written across the front in precise silver ink that seemed to shimmer when she tilted it in the light. Vicki glanced around the garage. Empty. Security cameras positioned exactly where she knew they'd be, and where their blind spots fell. Whoever left this knew the layout as well as she did. The envelope contained a single black card. No name, no logo, just an address and a time. 8 p.m. tomorrow. She should throw it away, She should report it. She should do anything except what she was considering. The address was for a restaurant in the financial district. Expensive. Exclusive. The kind of place she'd never have cause to enter. Vicki slipped the card into her pocket, feeling its weight like a small, dense planet with its own gravity. Tomorrow at 8 p.m., she would either be very smart or very foolish. But after 5 years of watching from the shadows, she couldn't ignore the chance to finally see what moved in them. The restaurant was dark when Vicki arrived, its windows opaque against the financial district's neon pulse. No open sign, no host waiting at the door. For a moment, she considered turning back, the weight of instinct heavy against her ribs. Then the door swung inward, revealing a sliver of amber light. Miss Morales. A man in a black suit nodded once, stepping aside to let her pass. Not one of the three from the mall. This one was older, with silver at his temples and eyes that had seen decades of nights like this one. Inside, the restaurant was a study in calculated intimacy. Tables draped in white linen stood like islands in shadow, each illuminated by a single hanging light that created perfect circles of visibility. All were empty, save one near the back, where a lone figure waited. DeCarlo sat facing the entrance, posture relaxed but alert. He'd traded his tuxedo for a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored to frame shoulders built for more than boardrooms. The black waves of his neck tattoos disappeared beneath his collar, lending him the appearance of a corporate executive with a carefully curated edge. You came. His voice carried across the empty restaurant without effort. I wondered if you would. Vicki moved toward him, heels clicking against hardwood in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She'd chosen her outfit with the same precision she applied to everything else. Dark slacks, crisp white blouse. Blazer fitted, but not tight. Professional armor against whatever this night might bring. Curiosity, she replied, taking the seat across from him. A place setting waited, fine china and crystal arranged with military precision. I wanted to see what a man like you could possibly want from someone like me. A man like me. DeCarlo's smile didn't reach his eyes. And what kind of man would that be, Miss Morales? The kind who walks into closed department stores with an entourage. The kind who knows my name when I never gave it. Vicki Alejandra Morales, loss prevention specialist, 5 years at Westfield Premier Mall, former mathematics major at California State before you dropped out to support your mother's legal defense. He recited the facts of her life as if reading a menu, each detail selected to demonstrate just how thoroughly she'd been investigated. You see better than most men on my payroll. Soft jazz filtered through hidden speakers. A waiter appeared from nowhere, pouring wine into her glass without asking if she wanted any. She didn't touch it. What do you want? Directness. He nodded approvingly. I appreciate that. DeCarlo leaned forward, the light catching the sharp angles of his face. I want you to do exactly what you're already doing. Watch, notice, report. Just to me, instead of to that idiot supervisor who dismisses every insight you bring him. Vicki's pulse quickened. You've been monitoring me. I monitor everything that happens in that mall. It's not your mall, isn't it? The question hung between them, simple and profound in its implication. A waiter delivered the first course, something delicate and artful that Vicki barely registered. DeCarlo didn't touch his food either. This wasn't about dining. It was about the space between them, the negotiation happening beneath their words. You've been tracking shipments, he continued. Aquila Logistics, premium skincare solutions. The patterns don't make sense because they're not supposed to. They're designed to be overlooked. By everyone except me, apparently. That's why we're having this conversation. DeCarlo took a sip of wine, the first movement that suggested he was human, rather than a carefully constructed facade. Aquila belongs to Raymond Kincaid. He has federal friends, corporate backing, and a particular talent for moving things through spaces that belong to me without my permission. And what exactly is he moving? That's what I want you to help me discover. DeCarlo set his glass down, fingers lingering on the stem. You already have the algorithm. You have the access. You have the pattern recognition skills that make you exceptional at seeing what others miss. What makes you think I'd work for you? Vicki kept her voice level, despite the surreal nature of the conversation. I don't even know what business you're in. You know exactly what business I'm in, Miss Morales, just as I know why you took the job at that mall 5 years ago. His eyes held hers. Your mother didn't steal that bracelet. The air between them thinned. Vicki felt exposed, as if he'd reached across the table and unzipped her skin. What do you know about my mother? I know she was deported after 15 years of employment without a single complaint. I know the boutique manager who accused her was compensated handsomely for her role in the frame. I know your mother now lives with your aunt in Guatemala City, still fighting to clear her name and return to the country where her daughter remains alone. Vicki's hands curled into fists beneath the table. How could you possibly... Information is currency, Miss Morales. I trade in it. DeCarlo's expression softened fractionally. Help me find what doesn't belong in my mall. In return, I'll help your mother's case. Quietly. The offer hung between them, a bridge over a chasm she hadn't known could be crossed. Why would you do that? Because talent should be recognized. Because loyalty should be rewarded. Because I protect what's mine. He stood, buttoning his jacket with a single fluid motion. You have until tomorrow night to decide. DeCarlo walked toward the exit, then paused. The meal is paid for. Stay as long as you like. The door closed behind him, leaving Vicki alone with untouched food, undrunk wine, and the unsettling awareness that Eddie DeCarlo knew more about her private war than she did about his. She'd come seeking answers and left with nothing but questions, and the dangerous possibility that her quest for justice might require a partnership with the very type of power she'd spent years fighting. Independent retail analytics consultant. That's what her new badge read, hanging beside her standard mall credentials. Johnson had been suspicious but compliant when the directive came from 3 levels above his pay grade. Now Vicki had access to every security feed, shipping manifest, and inventory database across the entire property, officially to enhance loss prevention protocols through advanced pattern analysis. Her apartment had become a war room. Laptop screens glowed in the pre-dawn darkness, casting her face in the blue light of data flowing through algorithms she refined nightly. Mall blueprints plastered the wall, shipping schedules annotated in red, security camera blind spots marked in yellow. Sleep became a luxury she rationed in 3-hour increments. On the surface, she maintained her regular patrol schedule, but her eyes now tracked different patterns: the rotation of security guards, the timing of deliveries, the faces that appeared in service corridors exactly 7 minutes after certain shipments arrived. The data should have been clear, a clean division between DeCarlo's operations and the rival he'd named Kincaid. Instead, it revealed something far more troubling. They're the same shipments, she murmured to the empty apartment, tracking the manifests across her screen. Premium Skincare Solutions and Aquila Logistics shared routing numbers, container codes that appeared in both networks. Either DeCarlo was playing an elaborate game or he was being played. Neither possibility settled well. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Car downstairs, 10 minutes. The voice was familiar, the silver-templed man from the restaurant. Vicki looked at her scattered notes, her screens full of evidence neither side would want exposed. I'm in the middle of something. Mr. DeCarlo says it's time you saw the other side of the ledger. 20 minutes later, they crossed into a neighborhood where wealth retreated and necessity asserted itself in chain-link fences and security bars over windows. The black sedan seemed conspicuous here, too clean, too intentional in its presence. It stopped before a renovated warehouse, its brick facade freshly pointed, windows clear and bright against surrounding decay. Inside, the space hummed with activity despite the late hour. A classroom filled with adults of varying ages bent over ESL workbooks. A small legal office where 2 young attorneys consulted with an elderly couple over documents. a computer lab where teenagers coded under the guidance of a patient instructor. East Side Community Alliance, announced DeCarlo, appearing beside her as if he'd materialized from the brick itself. Today he wore no suit, just dark jeans and a fitted black Henley that made the ink on his neck seem to flow toward his collarbones. Funded through a private foundation, no questions asked, no papers required. Vicki watched a young woman not much older than herself helping a family navigate housing forms. This doesn't seem like your style. And what is my style, Miss Morales? Midnight tuxedos, private restaurants, men who appear and disappear on command. DeCarlo's smile was brief but genuine. Different tools for different purposes. He guided her through the space with light touches. A hand at her elbow, fingers barely grazing her back when they navigated a narrow hallway. Each contact sent small electric currents across her skin. They ended in a modest office overlooking the main floor. Through the window, Vicki could see the entire operation, a microcosm of support systems the government had failed to provide. Protection is only power made visible, DeCarlo said, watching the people below. These families have no one to shield them from landlords who exploit, employers who threaten, systems designed to break them. So I became their shield. At what cost? Vicki asked, turning to face him. Nothing comes free, especially protection. Loyalty, community intelligence, sometimes labor. His eyes met hers, challenging and open simultaneously. I never take more than can be given willingly. And is that why you brought me here? To show me your generosity? I brought you here so you understand what's at stake. DeCarlo moved closer, close enough that she could smell that burning sugar scent again. Kincaid would strip this place to the studs if he could. His operation doesn't invest, it extracts. The proximity was disorienting, not because she felt threatened, but because she didn't. Despite everything she knew about him, despite the data revealing his own connections to shipments that shouldn't exist, something in her recognized something in him. The precision of purpose, the ruthless clarity. You're not telling me everything, she said quietly. Neither are you. His eyes searched hers. Your algorithm found connections between my operations and Kincaid's, routing numbers that shouldn't match, but do. Vicki tensed. You've been monitoring my searches. I've been protecting my investment. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe again. We have a mole, Miss Morales, someone connecting my legitimate business to Kincaid's smuggling operation. And you want me to find them. I want you to do what you do best, see the patterns others miss. Back in her apartment, the screens glowed with fresh data. DeCarlo had given her access to his shipping records, the official ones, meticulously maintained and cross-referenced. She overlaid them with the anomalies she detected, watching connections form and dissolve as her algorithm searched for the seam where truth separated from deception. At 3:17 a.m., the program found it, a recurring digital fingerprint buried in scheduling data. The same employee ID appearing at key transfer points where legitimate shipments diverged from their official routes. Marlo Chen, security supervisor for the East Wing loading docks. Employed by the mall for 7 years. Vicki stared at the name, the face from personnel files. Unremarkable, intentionally forgettable. The perfect shadow to move between worlds. She should call DeCarlo immediately. That was the arrangement. Instead, she saved the file to a private drive and closed her laptop. The data had started telling stories she wasn't ready to share. Stories about a man who built community centers with one hand while moving questionable shipments with the other. About her own growing willingness to operate outside the systems she once trusted. The worst part wasn't the moral ambiguity. It was how comfortable she'd become living within it, like a language she'd always known but never spoken aloud until now. The mall's digital ecosystem had always fascinated Vicki. Beyond security cameras and inventory trackers lay a less scrutinized network. Environmental systems, maintenance schedules, and promotional displays that pulsed through the building like a secondary nervous system. Most security teams ignored them. They had no obvious value, no clear connection to asset protection. But Vicky's algorithm cast a wider net. It consumed every digital footprint the mall generated, searching for patterns in the noise. At 2:43 a.m., her laptop chimed. She jolted awake at her kitchen table, neck stiff from sleeping hunched over her keyboard. The screen displayed a sequence that made no immediate sense. Timing adjustments in the mall's LED advertising schedule, each shift too small to notice without machine analysis. Millisecond variations in how long certain luxury brand advertisements displayed on the central atrium screens. "What are you?" she whispered, massaging her neck as she scrolled through the anomalies. She cross-referenced the timing shifts against shipping manifests from the past 3 months. The correlation emerged slowly, then with unmistakable clarity. Each advertising glitch preceded a shipping delay or inventory discrepancy by exactly 47 hours. Someone was using the mall's digital signage as a timing system, a subtle telegraph broadcasting shipment information to watching eyes. Vicki traced the system access logs backward. The scheduling interface required manager credentials, limiting the pool of potential users. Most entries came from the marketing department's bulk uploads, but the anomalies appeared as manual adjustments, entered during low-traffic hours from a terminal in the security office. The user ID belonged to Marlo Chen. She'd seen him before, quiet, efficient, always slightly behind DeCarlo's right shoulder when he visited the mall. The perfect body man, observant, forgettable, trusted with proximity. Vicki pulled his personnel file. 7 years of employment, consistent performance reviews, no disciplinary issues, a ghost designed to blend into institutional walls. The betrayal was elegant in its simplicity. Marlo didn't steal inventory or redirect shipments himself. He merely broadcasted their timing through innocuous LED display adjustments. Someone watching, Kincaid or his people, would know precisely when valuable shipments would be vulnerable. For 3 days, Vicki tracked the pattern in real time. Tuesday, Marlo adjusted the Cartier advertisement timing by 12 milliseconds. Thursday, a shipment of watches worth $470,000 was briefly misplaced between the loading dock and the boutique's receiving area, only to reappear missing 2 pieces. She compiled the evidence meticulously: access logs, timing adjustments, corresponding inventory discrepancies. Each connection clarified the mechanism of betrayal. Every missing envelope, every delayed shipment traced back to those tiny digital fingerprints. When the pattern was undeniable, she called the numbers she'd been given for emergencies. DeCarlo received her in an unmarked office building downtown, its sparse furnishings suggesting temporary occupation rather than permanence. He sat behind a desk of polished concrete, its weight anchoring the otherwise minimal space. "Show me," he said. No greeting or preamble. Vicki placed her laptop before him, navigating through her findings with clinical precision. The LED schedule adjustments, the access logs, the consistent 47-hour lead time, Marlo's digital signature on each manipulation. He's signaling shipment details to someone outside. The evidence suggests Raymond Kincaid. DeCarlo absorbed the information in silence, expression unchanged as the betrayal unfolded in data points and timestamps. She had expected anger, perhaps even violence, the reaction of a man discovering treachery in his inner circle. Instead, he closed her laptop gently and looked up with eyes that revealed nothing. "People betray for money," he said finally. "They stay loyal for reasons." "That's all you have to say?" Vicki asked, disbelief edging her voice. "He's been feeding your operation details to your enemy for months. And now I know." DeCarlo stood, buttoning his suit jacket in that single fluid motion she'd come to recognize. "Knowledge is advantage, Miss Morales. You've given me both." There was something unsettling in his calm, not the absence of emotion, but its perfect containment. Like a predator who doesn't waste energy on displays once prey is located. "What will you do with him?" "That's not your concern." It is, if you're planning to. To what? The question hung between them, a test she hadn't anticipated. To handle this outside the law. DeCarlo's smile was brief but genuine. You've been working for me for weeks, documenting shipments you know aren't entirely legitimate, building surveillance systems without warrants. The line you're worried about crossing was miles back, Miss Morales. The truth of it settled like cold stone in her stomach. Her moral ledger had been quietly adjusting itself with each piece of data she collected, each report she delivered, small compromises accumulating into something unrecognizable. I'm not a criminal, she said, more to herself than to him. No, you're something far more valuable. DeCarlo moved around the desk until he stood before her, close enough that she could see the precision in his tailoring, smell that now familiar burning sugar scent. You see the cracks before they break. His phone vibrated. He checked it, and something in his expression shifted. A brief calculation. Decision made. There's a charity event at the Premium Boutique next Friday. Kincaid will be there, along with federal friends he thinks I don't know about. DeCarlo's eyes held hers. They're planning something. I need to know what. How am I supposed to? You'll receive an invitation. Wear something that belongs in that room. He walked her to the door, hand resting lightly at the small of her back. The contact was brief but intentional, a reminder of the current flowing between them, neither entirely professional nor personal. As she turned to leave, he spoke one last time. The storm is coming, Miss Morales. Make sure you're on the right side of the glass when it breaks. The invitation arrived in a cream envelope, heavy cardstock embossed with gold. Premium presents Artisans Without Borders, followed by details in elegant script, Friday 8 p.m., cocktail attire. A charity auction to benefit international craftsmanship preservation, hosted by the boutique's director and special guest philanthropist Raymond Kincaid. Vicki knew a stage when she saw one. Her dress was midnight blue, simple enough to avoid attention, but precisely cut to suggest she belonged among wealth. She'd purchased it with the credit card DeCarlo had provided for operational expenses, and tried not to calculate how many hours at her regular salary it would take to afford it. Premium occupied the mall's northeast corner, its two-story space a temple to curated luxury. Tonight, it glowed with strategic lighting, champagne flowed freely, and conversations about charitable giving provided thin cover for business deals and social positioning. Security was visible but discreet. Men in suits with earpieces who scanned the room with practiced indifference. She spotted Kincaid immediately. Tall, blonde, with the kind of features that suggested generations of careful breeding. He moved through the crowd with practiced charm, touching shoulders, laughing at appropriate intervals. Nothing like DeCarlo's contained power. Vicki circulated slowly, champagne glass a prop in her hand. Her earpiece, disguised as a simple pearl earring, allowed her to monitor the mall's security channels while appearing to mingle. The radio chatter was routine until a code phrase cut through the noise. Maintenance confirms HVAC service in Quadrant 4 complete. There was no scheduled maintenance tonight. She slipped towards a staff door, badge granting access to the service corridor that ran behind the boutique. Her tablet connected to the security system, pulling up a blueprint of the mall's infrastructure. The HVAC system for Quadrant 4 connected directly to the service tunnel beneath Premium, a perfect position for a team to access the boutique undetected. Switching to the camera feeds, she noted a dark sedan parked at the service entrance, its government plates poorly concealed. Two men in tactical gear loitered near the loading dock, pretending to smoke. Radio discipline suggested federal training. It was happening tonight. Kincaid was using the charity event as cover for an FBI operation. The perfect trap for DeCarlo. Get him in a public place, surrounded by witnesses, where resistance would only compound charges. Vicki checked her watch. DeCarlo was scheduled to arrive in 17 minutes. Marlowe had manipulated the digital signage again. A 3-second delay in the central atrium advertisements that she now recognized as the signal. The trap was set. Her fingers flew across the tablet, accessing the mall's emergency systems. She couldn't warn DeCarlo directly. Too many eyes watching, too many ears listening. But she could change the battlefield. The mall's fire safety protocols included automated door controls that could seal sections during emergencies. Designed to contain smoke and flames, they could just as effectively contain federal agents if triggered at the right moment. Vicki created a maintenance override, scheduling a fire door function test for exactly 8:27 p.m., 3 minutes after DeCarlo's scheduled arrival. The system would seal all service corridors connected to Premium for a 15-minute diagnostic cycle, trapping anyone positioned there. She returned to the gala, heart racing beneath her composed exterior. The minutes stretched and compressed simultaneously. Kincaid checked his watch repeatedly, his polished charm slipping just enough to reveal the calculation beneath. At 8:24, DeCarlo entered. No entourage tonight, just him in a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The contrast between him and the room's polished brightness was deliberate, a shadow moving among the crystal. His eyes found hers across the space, a brief connection that carried more weight than any words they'd exchanged. He knew. Marlowe stood by the eastern display, hand casually touching his earpiece, signaling to someone unseen. Vicki moved toward the central service panel, positioning herself where she could monitor both the main floor and her tablet. 8:27 p.m. The fire doors engaged with a hydraulic hiss, sealing every service entrance with tempered glass and steel. Through the transparent barriers, she caught glimpses of tactical vests and frustrated gestures as federal agents found themselves trapped in the corridors. Kincaid's face transformed, control giving way to alarm. He moved toward Marlowe, whispering furiously. The security channel erupted with confused chatter. That's when the first shot came. Not from the federal team, but from Marlowe himself. Panicked by the collapsing plan, he'd drawn a weapon, aiming not at DeCarlo, but at the ceiling panel that controlled the emergency locks. Glass shattered. Women screamed. The impact triggered the sprinkler system, sending water cascading over silk displays and couture pieces. Guests scattered toward exits as security converged on the sound. In the chaos, DeCarlo moved like liquid, closing the distance between himself and Marlowe before anyone could register his movement. No rage, no shouting, just the efficient precision of a man who'd prepared for this moment. Vicki couldn't hear their exchange over the alarms, but she saw DeCarlo take something from Marlowe's pocket, a phone, perhaps a drive. The knife appeared and disappeared so quickly it might have been imagination, except for the bloom of red that spread across Marlowe's shoulder, precise and controlled. A wound designed to incapacitate without killing. DeCarlo left Marlowe slumped against a display case. Alive but bleeding, a gift for the federal agents to find when the doors eventually unlocked. Through the falling water and flashing lights, DeCarlo found her again. He crossed the space between them, took her arm with gentle firmness, and guided her toward a service exit only mall employees would know existed. "How did you know?" she asked, water streaming down her face, dress clinging to her skin. "I didn't," he replied, his body close as he sheltered her from the chaos. "But you did." They stepped into the service hallway just as the federal team finally breached the fire doors from the opposite end. DeCarlo pulled her into a recessed doorway, his body pressing hers against the wall, creating a shield of shadow. For a moment, they were suspended in perfect stillness, her breath against his neck, his hands steady at her waist. Water dripping from both their clothes onto the polished floor. His eyes held hers, something unspoken passing between them that transcended their arrangement. "Say that again," he whispered, echoing their first encounter. "And look at me." But this time, there was nothing to say. The choice had already been made. Silence settled over Premium, like ash after fire. Emergency lights cast rhythmic blue shadows across merchandise that hours ago had been worth millions, now soaked, shattered, scattered across marble floors. The air hung heavy with a dissonant cocktail, smoke from discharged weapons, perfume from broken bottles, the metallic scent of water meeting electronics. Security guards escorted the last trembling guests through the main entrance. Police radios crackled with professional detachment. Somewhere beyond the glass walls, paramedics loaded Marlowe onto a stretcher, while federal agents argued jurisdiction with local authorities. Vicki stood motionless in the service corridor, water dripping from her ruined dress, creating patterns on the floor that seemed more honest than anything else in the building. Her carefully applied makeup had washed away, leaving her face bare and defiant. DeCarlo watched her from 3 paces away, his own suit drenched, but somehow still commanding. Water traced the edges of his tattoos, following the patterns down his neck in rivulets. "You knew," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "You knew what Kincaid was planning, and you let it happen." "Not all of it." DeCarlo remained perfectly still, a counterpoint to the chaos they'd left behind. "I knew he wanted a show of federal force. I didn't know Marlowe would break. You could have told me. I needed your genuine reaction, your instincts under pressure." His eyes never left hers. "You performed better than I anticipated." The words hit like sleet against glass. For weeks, she'd been constructing elaborate justifications for their arrangement, moral frameworks that allowed her to maintain the fiction that she was still the person she'd been 5 years ago, righteous, uncorrupted, fighting a system rather than serving one. That fiction dissolved in the harsh light of his admission. "You used me." The words emerged not as accusation, but as quiet recognition of a truth she'd been avoiding. DeCarlo stepped closer, water pooling between them on the marble floor. His proximity was no longer a negotiation tactic. It was something more dangerous, a habit, a comfort, a rhythm they'd fallen into without naming it. "I never said I was clean," he replied, voice dropping to match hers. "I said I was real." A security alarm reset itself somewhere distant, briefly cutting the emergency lights and plunging them into darkness before the system rebooted. In that moment of perfect black, Vicki felt, rather than saw him move closer, felt the heat of him separate from the cooling wetness of her clothes. When light returned, they stood inches apart, close enough that she could see droplets clinging to his eyelashes, could trace the precise line where his beard was trimmed along his jaw. "Is this real?" she asked, gesturing to the space between them. "Or is this another calculation, another strategy to ensure my loyalty? Does it matter?" His question wasn't dismissive, but genuinely curious, as if he too were trying to distinguish between what he wanted and what he needed. "It matters to me." Vicki straightened, refusing to be diminished even as water dripped from her hair onto her shoulders. "I need clear lines, DeCarlo. Not just professionally, especially not after tonight." His expression shifted, something close to respect, displacing his usual careful control. "What terms would you propose, Miss Morales?" "No more tests I don't know about. No more manipulated circumstances to see how I'll react. If we're partners in this, then treat me like one, not a pawn or an asset to be deployed." "And if I agree?" DeCarlo's hand moved, not touching her but hovering near her face as if tracing the air beside her cheek. "What will you offer in return?" "The same thing I've been giving you since the beginning. The truth as I see it, even when it's not what you want to hear." She didn't flinch from his proximity, didn't yield to the gravity between them. "I won't be another Marlowe. Marlowe betrayed me for money. You would only betray me for principle." DeCarlo's smile was fleeting but genuine. "That makes you infinitely more dangerous." "Then why keep me close?" "Because dangerous things should be kept where you can watch them." His hand finally completed its journey, fingers light against her jaw as he tilted her face up. "And because some risks are worth taking." The tension between them crystallized, neither professional nor merely physical, but something more complex. A recognition between equals who had chosen opposing moral frameworks, but found themselves standing on common ground. Vicki stepped back, breaking the contact but not the connection. "I need to know about my mother's case. You promised help. Was that real or just leverage?" DeCarlo reached into his wet jacket, removing a slim leather portfolio somehow protected from the water. He handed it to her without explanation. Inside, Vicki found legal documents, motions filed, hearings scheduled, a pathway to revisiting her mother's deportation case on grounds of manufactured evidence. The paperwork bore the letterhead of one of the city's most prestigious immigration law firms. "It's already in motion," he said. "Has been since our first dinner." Why? The question contained multitudes. Why help her? Why trust her? Why reveal this now? Because integrity should be rewarded, even when it's inconvenient. DeCarlo glanced towards the boutique, where federal agents were finally entering the main floor. "We should go." "Separate exits, separate stories." Vicki nodded, clutching the portfolio. "What happens now? With Kincaid? With the operation?" "Now we adapt. Kincaid will retreat temporarily. The federal interest will increase." DeCarlo straightened his soaked tie in a gesture so normal it seemed out of place after everything that had happened. "And you will continue to see what others miss." He turned to leave, then paused. "Tomorrow, the community center. 7 o'clock. There are people you should meet, people who can help with your mother's return." Vicki watched him walk away, his footsteps leaving wet prints on marble that began evaporating almost immediately. The evidence of his presence disappearing while the impact remained, a perfect metaphor for everything about him. She headed toward the employee exit, the portfolio pressed against her chest like armor. The rain had stopped inside, but somewhere beyond the mall's glass walls, the real storm was just beginning. The mall changed in subtle ways over the following weeks. Security rotations tightened. Inventory protocols received unexpected audits. The premium boutique reopened after extensive renovations, its interior redesigned to erase all evidence of that rain-soaked night. Nothing tangible remained of the chaos except a persistent smell of new paint and the occasional employee whisper about the incident. Federal agents disappeared from service corridors. Marlo Chen vanished from payroll records as thoroughly as if he'd never existed. Raymond Kincaid's charity foundation announced an indefinite hiatus for restructuring purposes. Vicki watched it all from a careful distance. She'd submitted her resignation the morning after the sprinklers rained over Silk, citing personal reasons. Johnson had been visibly relieved, likely sensing complications beyond his management grade. Her security badge was deactivated by noon, her personal effects boxed and waiting at reception. From her apartment, she tracked the aftermath through news reports and digital breadcrumbs. The FBI's case against DeCarlo collapsed under evidentiary issues. Key files mysteriously corrupted, witness testimonies suddenly recanted. An anonymous source leaked financial records connecting Kincaid to offshore accounts and shell companies, triggering investigations from 3 separate agencies. His empire began unraveling thread by thread, too rapidly for coincidence. The mall developed new legends. Loss prevention staff spoke in hushed tones about the security woman who saw too much and vanished. Some said she'd been bought off. Others claimed DeCarlo had her eliminated. The truth, that she spent her days in a small office downtown, sorting through evidence and building cases, was too mundane for gossip. On her final day consulting for DeCarlo's legal team, Vicki compiled one last report, not about shipments or security breaches, but about vulnerability, the community center's precarious position in his ecosystem of power. She created a legal framework that would protect it regardless of his fate, ensuring programs remained funded and operational even if every other DeCarlo enterprise collapsed. The proposal sat on her kitchen table for 3 days before she finally sent it through encrypted channels. She received no acknowledgement, but 2 weeks later, the Eastside Community Alliance announced its reorganization as an independent nonprofit with an irrevocable trust structure. Its connection to DeCarlo became a matter of public record rather than whispered knowledge, a declaration that stripped it of its usefulness as a secret but armored it against future attacks. On a Thursday evening, exactly 47 days after the sprinklers rained over Marble, Vicki returned from grocery shopping to find a black sedan idling outside her apartment building. The sight stopped her mid-step, shopping bag heavy against her hip. For a moment, she considered turning around, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Instead, she approached. The driver, not the silver-templed man from before, but someone younger with the same carefully neutral expression, opened the rear door without a word. DeCarlo sat inside, a manila folder resting on his knee. His suit was charcoal this time, his presence filling the vehicle's interior like smoke. The weeks had left no visible mark on him, as if chaos itself refused to touch his composed exterior. "Miss Morales." He gestured to the empty seat beside him. Vicki remained standing, grocery bag still clutched in one hand. "I thought our business was concluded." "Some relationships transcend business." He lifted the folder. "Your mother's case. The hearing is scheduled for next month. Her temporary visa has been approved for the proceedings." A weight Vicki had carried for 5 years shifted, not disappearing but redistributing itself across her shoulders. She'd known this was coming, had seen the paperwork, participated in the preparations, but hearing it spoken aloud made it suddenly, irrevocably real. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, too small for the enormity they carried. "You have unusual ideas about protecting my interests," DeCarlo said, changing subjects with characteristic efficiency. The community center's new legal structure eliminates several useful operational advantages. It also makes it untouchable. No matter what happens to you or your other enterprises, those programs will continue. A significant concession. A necessary one. Vicki set her grocery bag down, the mundane reality of milk and bread incongruous against the weight of their conversation. "Is that why you're here? To discuss my unauthorized restructuring?" "We did what you asked," DeCarlo said, his voice dropping to that register that seemed designed for her alone. "Now, I need you to see farther." The invitation hung between them, unspoken but clear, in the space left after his words. Something had shifted in their dynamic, not a softening of his edges or a compromise of her principles, but a recognition of complementary strengths. His power and her perception, his reach and her insight. "Kincaid is gone, but others will emerge," DeCarlo continued. "The ecosystem abhors a vacuum. I need someone who can see the movements before they solidify." "You want me to come back?" "I want you to move forward, with resources appropriate to your abilities." Vicki studied him in the fading light. The man who had entered her life like a shadow now offered something beyond transaction. Not friendship exactly, certainly not love, but a partnership built on something rarer than either. Respect, recognition, the acknowledgement of equal and opposite forces, finding balance. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A position, formally advising on security across all my interests. Unofficially," he left the sentence unfinished, allowing her to fill the space with possibilities. "And my mother?" "Will be met at the airport by my attorneys, settled in a furnished apartment near your own, and provided with everything necessary while her case proceeds." He opened the folder, revealing documents that confirmed every word. "The rest depends on the hearing, but our legal team is confident." Vicki thought of her apartment, the algorithms still running, the walls still covered in maps and data. She thought of the mall, its gleaming surfaces hiding rot and renewal in equal measure. She thought of 5 years spent fighting a system only to find herself invited inside another. "I have conditions," she said. DeCarlo's smile was brief but genuine. "I would expect nothing less." She hesitated one final moment at the threshold of choice, then leaving her groceries on the sidewalk like the last remnant of a different life. She slid into the seat beside him. The car door closed with the soft finality of deliberate decision. Not surrender, but strategic alliance. Not romance, but the recognition of complementary strengths aligning against a world designed to break them both. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, Vicki felt the city reconfigure itself around them. Its shadows and lights, its power and vulnerability suddenly visible from this new vantage point. She had spent years seeing what others missed. Now she would learn what that vision could build when paired with the power to act on it. The road ahead unfolded, neither light nor dark, but something more complex. A terrain mapped in shades of gray that only they could navigate together.